She sat in the rain, a shadow against the concrete walls of the city. Her fur, once white and proud, was now tangled and gray, soaked in the cold drizzle. Her ribs pressed sharply against her fragile body, and yet, her eyes shone like twin sapphires in the dark. Eyes too beautiful to be ignored. Eyes that told a story of hunger, abandonment, and longing. The streets were empty, but her silence was louder than any cry. She did not bark. She did not beg. She simply sat there, as if waiting for a world that had already walked away. But beauty, even in brokenness, has a way of demanding to be seen. Most would pass without looking twice. To them she was just another stray, another lost cause. But fate had a way of placing her exactly where she needed to be. And in that moment, she was not invisible anymore. This is not the story of a forgotten dog. This is the story of a soul too beautiful to vanish into silence. Her days were long and unforgiving. She wandered from alley to alley, her paws raw against the cracked pavement. Hunger gnawed at her with every step, yet there was little to find. Trash cans toppled over, empty food wrappers, the occasional stale piece of bread too hard to chew. People saw her, but they did not really see. Some turned away. Some waved their hands to chase her off. Some looked down with pity, but pity did not fill her stomach. What she craved most was not food, not even shelter, but recognition. To belong somewhere again. Her fur once shimmered like snow under the sun. Now it clung in clumps to her frail frame. The city swallowed her like it swallowed many others. Souls forgotten, stories untold. But her eyes remained untouched. Icy blue, defiant and haunting. They carried the weight of every silent plea she could not voice. In the endless gray of the streets, those eyes were the last sparks of beauty, the last sparks of hope. One evening, as the rain thickened, a car slowed at the edge of the road. A man inside watched her. He did not hurry past. He did not avert his gaze. He saw her. Not just her body, worn and fragile, but her presence. She sat curled by the wall, drenched, trembling, too weak to move. Their eyes met through the blur of raindrops. His heart clenched. Because beauty, real beauty, has a way of piercing through walls of indifference. And in that moment, her story changed direction. Most would have kept driving. It was easier that way, to let the world remain untouched. But he opened his door. He stepped out into the rain. He was not a rescuer by profession. He was not wealthy. He was not prepared. He was simply human. Human enough to choose compassion over convenience. And that choice, simple as it was, would alter both of their lives forever. He approached slowly, crouching low, his hands empty except for a small piece of bread. His voice was soft, almost a whisper against the sound of the rain. But she stiffened. Her body tensed. Fear raced through her veins faster than hunger. When he took one more step, she bolted. Her paws splashed against puddles as she darted into the shadows. The man sighed, but he did not leave. He understood. Trust was not something given. It was earned, heartbeat by heartbeat. The next day he returned. And the next. Always at the same spot, always waiting with something to eat. He never chased. He never forced. He simply stayed. And slowly fear met hunger. Hunger met hope. The blue eyes began to watch him from a distance, curious, hesitant, caught between survival and surrender. She wanted to believe. She wanted to be safe again. Rescue is not a moment. Rescue is a process. It was on a night heavy with rain that the miracle happened. He sat on the cold ground, soaked, refusing to leave. Food lay beside him, untouched. He did not reach out. He only waited. From the shadows she appeared. Her fur clung to her thin frame, water dripping from her whiskers. Her paws trembled as she moved closer. Every step was a battle against fear. And then, slowly, her nose brushed his hand. A touch so fragile, so fleeting, and yet it shattered the wall between them. His breath caught. He did not move, afraid to break the spell. For the first time in her forgotten life, she allowed herself to believe. For the first time, she was no longer invisible. She was seen. And in that fragile connection, both of their hearts shifted forever. He wrapped her gently in a blanket and lifted her into his arms. She did not resist. She did not struggle. Her body was too weak, her spirit too tired. Yet her eyes never left his face. They searched, they questioned, but for the first time they did not fear. The drive was quiet. Raindrops tapped against the windows. She lay still, her head resting on the seat, watching the world blur past. Every turn of the wheel carried her farther from the life she had known and closer to something she could not yet imagine. For her, the streets had been a prison. For him, this was not just an act of charity, it was a promise. A promise that she would not be alone again. The journey was only beginning. But it was no longer her journey alone. It was theirs. The clinic was small, its walls plain, but inside it was filled with hope. The veterinarian examined her carefully. Beneath the matted fur, scars revealed the story of neglect. Her weight was dangerously low. Her body trembled under the touch of cold instruments. Needles delivered medicine. Tubes carried fluids. Machines measured fragile breaths. She was fighting, but the battle was uphill. The man stayed by her side. He whispered words she could not understand, but his voice carried warmth, patience, and love. He did not know if she would make it through the night. But he refused to leave. Sometimes love is not about grand gestures. Sometimes it is simply staying. Holding on when everything else suggests letting go. And so through the long night he stayed. Days turned into weeks. Her body, once frail and brittle, began to mend. For that clung in clumps grew back thick and soft, white and gray like the winter sky. Her ribs no longer pressed so sharply against her skin. Strength returned to her legs. And her eyes, those eyes of piercing blue, brightened with life. No longer dulled by pain, they shimmered with curiosity, mischief, and joy. For the first time she ran. Not to escape, not to hide, but to play. She chased after a ball in the grass, tongue lolling, ears flapping, heart free. The man laughed, a sound filled with relief and gratitude. The streets had taken so much from her. But here, with care and time, she bloomed again. She was no longer the forgotten shadow. She was radiant. She was alive. She was loved. They spent their evenings together, quiet but full. He would sit on the porch, and she would rest beside him, her head heavy on his lap. The sun would sink into gold, painting the sky, and in that light they both found peace. In her eyes, he was more than a rescuer. He was her anchor, her safe harbor in a storm-torn life. In his eyes, she was more than a dog. She was a reminder that love is found not in perfection, but in survival, in courage, in the ability to trust again. They did not need words. Their bond was spoken in glances, in shared silences, in the rhythm of breathing side by side. It was a bond that no force could erase. She had once been invisible. Now she was unforgettable. Her story is not just hers. It is a story of every soul cast aside, every creature deemed unworthy, every life overlooked. She was too beautiful to be forgotten. But in truth, no life is too small, too broken, or too lost to matter. Her beauty was never in her fur or her form. It was in her resilience, her survival, her willingness to trust again. It was in the man who chose to see her when the world chose to look away. We all carry the power to rescue, to transform, to remind the forgotten that they are still seen. Sometimes all it takes is a single choice: to stop, to care, to love. She was too beautiful to be forgotten. And because someone chose to see, she never will be again.